Well, it's been about a month since I removed and disassembled the engine on my 2012 Chevy Caprice PPV, and it's just been sitting while I fixed a broken Italian car, a broken German car, and while I waited on a few new parts and one very used part. This is the camshaft out of another 6-liter Caprice engine, and as you can see, this cam lobe has seen better days. Like many GM V8 engines of this era, the Caprice has AFM, or Active Fuel Management, otherwise known as displacement on demand. This system uses special lifters to shut off 4 cylinders during light load and cruising situations to save fuel. The system uses a valve lifter oil manifold, or V-loam, which houses 4 solenoids. When the computer commands it, the solenoids open and allow pressurized oil to flow to the intake and exhaust AFM lifters, which activates their latching pins. With the pins pushed in, the outer portion of the lifter follows the cam lobe, and the inner portion that would normally push up on the push rods stays stationary. This keeps both intake and exhaust valves for their respective cylinders closed, and the computer turns off the injector and the coil for those cylinders as well. Now, the issues with AFM were mostly caused by low oil pressure. The lifters require about 25 psi to activate the latching pins, and if a switch to V4 mode is commanded with insufficient oil pressure, the pins could get stuck in sort of an in-between position, which damages the lifter body and causes a collapsed lifter that sounds just like this. To make this simple, you can think of a collapsed lifter as a shorter lifter. It's not able to take up the slack in the valve train, which causes the lifter to bounce up and down. This literally beats down the cam lobe and can also break a push rod. The oil pressure issues were mostly caused by leaking V-loam, clogged V-loam oil screen, engine sludge, low oil level, or even a bad solenoid. Now, this doesn't happen to all AFM engines. I know one of your baby's mama's cousin's uncle's brother has a Chevy Silverado with an AFM V8 that has 300,000 miles on it, and all he's done is tires and brakes. I get it, and in fact, my Caprice's engine was in excellent condition. But if you're about to add 100 horsepower with a big cam, headers, and intake and a tune like I am, or you're not worried about the roughly 1 to 2 mpg increase you get with AFM, then you might as well delete it, because it can be a problematic system that can cost a lot of money to fix. I love LS engines, but they had a couple more issues, and we're going to get into that in this episode as well. I'm back on the Caprice project now, so my friend Eugene and I removed the transmission and set it on a tire. I unbolted and removed the flex plate, and then we manhandled this aluminum 6-liter V8 engine onto my engine stand, because Eugene and I are actually pro bodybuilders and we're really strong. Or the aluminum LS engines are really light. I don't know, one of the two. Since we're replacing the cam, I'm upgrading the oil pump, and removing the oil pan makes this infinitely easier, so off the oil pan came. From here, I removed the pickup tube and then the old oil pump, and then I donated some cash to the Gary Sinise Foundation and his first responder program. Yes, Lieutenant Dan runs a pretty awesome foundation that helps out our veterans and our first responders. The first responders program provides 100% mortgage-free homes to severely injured officers, as well as home modifications and even car modifications to help them restore their independence and mobility. I'm not sponsored by the Gary Sinise Foundation at all. Lieutenant Dan has no clue I'm mentioning this. I just want to help out our men and women in blue, and when I revealed the Caprice project, I said I'd be picking random police charities to help out. In the reveal video, I donated to the Get Behind the Vest program, and my sponsor for that video, Avalon King Ceramic Coating, donated $1,500 as well. If you're interested, I'll leave the charities linked down below in the description box. All right, so we have the transmission hanging out on an old 315 35 17-inch tire that I used to run on this car when it had the factory WS6 wheels. I saved 2 of them to do a big smoky burnout, and then I got rid of the 17, so it has been relegated to transmission duties. We have the engine completely disassembled, and let me show you guys some of the new and upgraded parts that I'll be installing. First off, we have the factory cylinder heads. I sent them to my local machine shop, so they have been resurfaced, so we don't have any head gasket sealing issues. We have the dual BTR valve springs and the titanium retainers installed at the proper height for the proper spring pressure, and the only modification I made to these heads were the intake valve. Okay, so this is a factory intake valve. And you can see it's a nice and chunky 110 grams, and this is a hollow stem LS3 intake valve at only 88 grams. So I found 10 of these used. You only need 8, so I have 2 extras, and they were only 130 bucks. They look brand new, but we had a 3-angle valve job done to the heads, and even though these are direct drop-in valves, this was an excellent time to install those. And the heads look practically brand new, ready to be installed. So we also have an awesome camshaft I'm so excited to install. This is a Mayhem 3 from England Green. I'll leave a link down below. This is a 234, 244 duration, and I forget the lift. It's on a 113 LSA, and it sounds kind of like this. Needless to say, this cop car will be chopping away nicely, and that cam is going to produce some awesome power on the dyno as well. A couple other things we're doing while we're in there. We're upgrading the oil pump, so we're using the Mellings 10295 high pressure oil pump. It comes with the red spring inside. You can put the stock pressure blue spring in, or check this out. They have the Copo Camaro spring. So this increases the pressure 15 PSI over the red spring. We're gonna leave that out, but kind of cool that they specify a spring for the rare Copo Camaro. We're also gonna be replacing the timing chain guide to, I believe this is just the normal LS3 style. We're moving to a 3-bolt cam instead of a 1-bolt, so we have to change out the sprocket. We have a brand new GM timing chain. I measured these, they're identical. There's practically no wear on the old engine. And then later on in the video, I'll show you the trunnion upgrade for the rocker arms. We have hardened push rods over there. I'm probably forgetting some stuff, but regardless, let's get back to work on this engine. We're gonna be installing the camshaft, the oil pump, the timing chain, everything right now, getting the pans on there and moving on. All right, our engine is all cleaned up. Our Mayhem camshaft is installed. We have the cam retaining plate torqued and Loctited in place. And now we have a 3-bolt cam instead of the original single-bolt cam. So a couple things. We have the little dot here on the crankshaft sprocket in the 12 o'clock position pointing up. So we have top dead center on cylinder number 1. And then if you put this little dowel to the right on the camshaft, it'll kind of get you in the ballpark of where you need to be with this cam sprocket. So see this little marking here? That needs to be in the 6 o'clock position, and it needs to go dot to dot with the crankshaft sprocket. So a couple other things that have to do with cleaning. This may already be in the comment section, but you want to be really gentle when you're cleaning an aluminum engine. So although I was using an air tool, my wheel at the end is a very soft bristled plastic brush, and this doesn't remove any material whatsoever. That's what you want. So don't use anything like this, or like that. It will definitely make little divots in the aluminum, and you'll have head gasket sealing issues. So this cleans it up in short order. As you can see, it looks really, really nice. And I used my 100-year-old oiling can that I literally found buried in the backyard of my 100-year-old house when we were doing some work out there. And I just squirt a little bit of oil into the cylinders since they were dry from all the brake clean, kind of move it around in there. And then I'll do a final clean when we go to put the head gasket and the head back on because it's a little bit oily right now. But right now we're ready for the timing chain, the little damper that goes here, the oil pump, the oil pan, and then I have a neighbor coming in about 45 minutes to help me lift this thing back onto the cradle.
And then we got a torque converter to install as well.
Oh, and if you guys need all the torque specs for most LS engines, I'll leave that linked down below. It's totally free. And while you're down there, check out my Amazon garage where I've put links to all my favorite automotive Amazon products and tools. There's some really good deals down there, and it's a totally free way of supporting my channel. Amazon sets aside a small commission for everything they sell, so as long as you click on any of my Amazon links or just the garage link before you buy literally anything, doesn't even need to be something I've listed, I get a few pennies at no extra cost to you because Amazon would have normally just kept this commission. I've also started a new automotive business that a lot of you guys might be interested in, so check that out in the description box too.
About an hour later, and our engine is ready to go back on the cradle. So I'm going to be installing the heads and everything else on the cradle. And you may notice I already have the balancer on. That's because I always put that on to center the front cover before I tighten it. That's very important, otherwise you'll get some leaks. There's a special tool for this that I don't have, but you got to put this on anyway, so I like to do that, and I haven't had any issues yet. Something else I didn't show is that you can actually replace the rear cover and the rear main seal on the stand. It's kind of a pain in the butt to slide it in and out, but it's doable. So we have both front and new rear seals, new gaskets, new oil pan gasket, new oil pump. Everything is sealed up and ready to go. So we're moving on to the transmission, and I actually removed the transmission and I left the torque converter bolted to the flywheel just to make it lighter for us to pick up. But that was just postponing the inevitable because I have to put this torque converter on the transmission first. And I like to pre-fill these a little bit as well. So this is going to be a heavy beast going back together. And the torque converter that we're using is from Circle D. They make phenomenal torque converters. I've used them in the past. This is a 3800 multi-disc lockup torque converter. So this can be locked up under boost, under spray. It's a very strong torque converter. It's kind of overkill for this build unless we go crazy, but a very, very nice piece. And I'll link all the sponsors down below for you guys, but Circle D torque converter, very nice piece. This is gonna allow the Caprice to launch like a bat out of hell, and it's gonna match the camshaft perfectly. So I spec'd out the camshaft and the converter together. I spoke to both companies and they agreed this would be an excellent match, and that's how you want to do it. So let me slide this onto the transmission. My neighbor's almost here. Okay, hang on. This is too pretty not to show you guys. This thing was facing down in the box, so I didn't even get to see this. Look at this torque converter. This is so nice. LS multi-disc, 258 millimeter. Then they put their little date code down there as well. This is a billet torque converter. This is probably one of the nicest ones I've ever seen. So it's a shame that we'll never see this pretty face again. Well, unless I grenade the engine or the transmission, then I guess we'll see it again. All right, so we're moving along here. I'm getting excited. I just bolted up the torque converter to the flex plate that is torqued. Use Loctite on those as well, as per the Circle D instructions. And I was just about to install the starter right down there, and I noticed that we have some wiring issues. Take a look at this. Look at the wires going to this connector. the insulation has completely come off. So everything else on this harness I looked over and it's very flexible, but in this one spot, which is right there, the heat must have just been extreme when it was idling away in Florida. Now the wiring itself seems intact, so I think what I'm gonna do here is we're gonna tape it up and then I'm gonna wrap it up with this heat tape, and that should fix our problem. We weren't getting a check engine light or anything like that, so I think the connection is good here. But anyway, I'm going to start plugging away. I'm gonna wrap up all of this little stuff, and then we're bolting the cylinder heads on. All right, guys, we dodged a bullet with this harness. I was able to wrap each wire individually. We have our heat tape, and this is good to go. All right, we are moving along. I like to put a lot of the front together before the cylinder heads. That way we're not kind of wrestling with another piece of metal about this high, so we can get the AC compressor in nicely, the alternator back in, and not have to fight anything, especially hooking up lines and stuff underneath the cylinder head. So anyway, this stuff is all done. We're moving on to bolting the heads on, and I've already put in some of the lifters, but I just wanted to show you what was going on here. So this is a new lifter tray. These are factory Ls7 lifters. GM was on strike for so long, and these were on back order forever, but they finally came back. A bunch of Chinese knockoffs hit the market. It was a big mess, but these are the real GM lifters, and these are the displacement on demand lifters here, as you can see. So we're going to all traditional lifters, so we're deleting that entire system, and that means we're getting rid of the V-loam plate that houses the 4 solenoids that sends oil pressure to the lifters, and we're just going to be using a factory style normal valley cover plate, and that'll eliminate the entire DOD system. So this is all cleaned up. I just have to brake clean it a little bit more, insert our bolts here, and the lifters are really easy. Let me show you how they go in. The LS engine in general is so easy to work on. You saw the timing marks. No big deal. Takes 2 seconds to time the engine. And the lifters are really easy. The difference between these and the old Chevy small blocks is that you do have to have the cylinder heads off to replace your lifters, but that's it. Our lifters are in. We're gonna get a bolt here, put the other ones in, and then we're ready to go ahead and put the cylinder heads on. Something interesting, this engine, when I took it apart, it didn't have rear dowel pins for the heads. It was really weird. There were only 2 in the front, so I went to the dealer, picked those up. We're good to go. It's time to get those on here. And we got to mess around with these headers. These headers are going to be a big pain in the butt because of that cooler. All right, we have our cylinder heads on. This thing is starting to look like an engine again, and I had a little bit of help, which was nice. And we've mocked up the headers, and I'm having some issues, as you can see by this gigantic gap here. And I'll get to that in a minute, but first, let me show you guys another upgrade I'm doing to prevent possible engine damage. And this is something that can happen, especially if you're modifying an LS engine. And that would, of course, be with the rocker arms. So these have already all been modified. Let me show you guys what a stock one looks like. And here she is. So if you see here in the middle, you have this portion that moves, so the bolt goes through the center. You have your push rod that goes on this side, and this contacts the top of the valve. So this is constantly moving like this, and there are needle bearings inside of here. This is the trunnion body, the center portion, and there are needle bearings inside of here. You really can't see them. And these normally don't fail when the engine's completely stock, but when you start modifying them with a big lopey camshaft, these can walk out, these caps, and the bearings can spew into your engine. So this is what that would look like, all these little tiny bearings in your engine. So they've come up with a trunnion upgrade. The one I bought is from BTR. There are a few other ones on the market, and you're basically replacing that entire center section, and then you're using C-clips and a washer on the side, and this ensures that this trunnion can never slide out and the bearings won't ever release themselves into your engine. Now, these are not difficult to replace at all. You're going to use a 22mm socket. There's a flat side to this. You put that down, and then a 13mm socket on top. Normally, you'd have this bolted to your bench. I just bought it, but this is how it works. And you just simply push it out. It's much easier if it's bolted down, but I wanted to show you guys, even though I have a hydraulic press in the garage, that you don't need that in order to do this. So I went to Harbor Freight just a couple hours ago, and I bought this, and they're only about $50, and basically pay for themselves right away with one of these jobs here. So right now we have a completely emptied out rocker arm, and we can start to press the new parts in. So here's the roller bearing assembly. You want the letters facing up. And we're simply just going to place that here, make sure it's even, and these push in really easily. All right. So that's that. Now we're gonna drop the new trunnion body in. Take another one of these caps with the roller bearings, put it on the top there. We're gonna set up a washer on the bottom and a washer on top, and we're just gonna press it on. Just like that. From there, we're just gonna put a washer on and a snap ring. Do the same to the other side, and bam, you've just corrected an issue GM had with their rocker arms if you modify your car. I'll give it to them. From the factory, the rocker arms, they're pretty stout. All right, so a couple of other issues with the LS engine, and this one I'm going to make a separate video on. This isn't an actual LS7 valve. This is just one out of the Caprice. But the LS7, so the C6 Z06 and the 5th gen Z28 Camaro, they had issues where the valves would drop into the cylinder and completely wipe out the really, really expensive engine. So that was a major factory defect, and it was just a bummer because otherwise the car was phenomenal. Something else, on the Caprice, if you put a gigantic camshaft in like I am, what can happen with these factory valves is they can start to mushroom at the top. So not a huge issue, but if you're revving these things to 65, 7,000 RPM, that's another reason why I went with the LS3 valve. So it is lighter and it's stronger, so it won't have that issue. So yeah, you could replace those valves if you're putting a big cam in your car. The very early LS1s in the Camaros and Firebirds and even Corvettes, they had oil pump failure issues. So we don't really see that anymore, but early on, that was kind of like the first factory defect on the LS1, along with some piston slap issues, which was deemed normal. But overall, the LS family of engines, which does include the Caprice, the L76, the L77, the LQ9 in the trucks, the LQ4, these are all LS engines, all right, guys? They're the same thing. All the parts are basically interchangeable, but they have different designations. So anyway, these are very, very awesome engines. As you know, everybody puts them in practically every swap. So obviously, I'm a big LS fan. I've owned that for 16 years and had every nut and bolt out of it. It's a 1,000 horsepower turbo Trans Am. And now we have this right here. So let me show you guys the issue I'm having with the headers. So on the passenger side, I mean, this won't even come close. Oh, I only have one bolt in it. But basically the trans cooler lines are totally in the way and the headers are hitting this pedestal right here. As you can see, I'm kind of tapping on it. So we would definitely need to modify the trans lines somehow. It seems almost impossible at this point. I'm gonna have to figure that out. And then this was the side that I was expecting to have the issues on. And these are 5th generation Camaro SS headers, so they're not specifically built for the Caprice. I believe Cook's is the only one that builds Caprice specific headers that fit like a glove, but they're like $1,000. These are like $300, so I figured I'd try and make these work. But everybody said I would have issues with the oil cooler hitting, and it clears. See the oil cooler down there? It clears. These are basically bolted up. They have no gasket, but so I'm not really exactly sure what's going on there, but it is also hitting that right there, the engine mount pedestal. So I'll have to dent in the header on this side if I want these to fit. So anyway, that is for the next episode. We're gonna get these headers fitted on our engine. We're getting this thing completely put back together, put into the car, and we're starting her up. All right, guys, that'll do it for today's video. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at LegitStreetCars, where I post quick updates on all of the projects. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked the video, share the video, subscribe if you're new, and most importantly, have an awesome day. I'll catch all of you in the next video.